What's going on, everybody? We are back with another UFC breakdown and predictions video, this time for UFC Louisville, Cannonier versus Nasruddin Imavov. And we are coming off of a mediocre pay-per-view of UFC 302. And you guys will notice on my channel that I actually didn't drop a recap video. Reason being is I had other obligations that weekend. I did watch the fights, but I didn't get home until Sunday night. So by the time I would have made the video and dropped it, it would have been like 2 days past the event. So I thought it was kind of meaningless to put it out. But in terms of how we did pick-wise, we went 10-2 on the event. We would have went 11-1, but that Andre Lima 4-pound weight miss didn't sit right with me. So I did change my pick last minute to Mitch Raposo, which obviously didn't end up working out in my favor. But I went 10-2 on picks over UFC 302. So over the past 3 events, I am 28-8 on picks officially, which is at a 78% success rate. So we're on an absolute roll right now. Hopefully we can continue that into UFC Louisville, but this is a tricky card in terms of picks. So hopefully we can get some good ones. We can make some money, and yeah, we just hopefully it's an overall great event as well. Without further ado, let's get into these breakdowns. Make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel for more UFC content, and drop your comments down below as well. I want to hear what your guys' thoughts and perspectives are on each matchup and the fights. We've got 14 fights to break down, so let's get right into it. Hopefully I do not ramble anymore. Starting off the card, we have a newcomer in Puja, Tomar, going up against Ryan Amanda, and I'm obviously very unfamiliar with Puja, so I went and I watched some regional tape on her, and I don't think she's going to be able to defeat Ryan in her UFC debut. Puja comes out extremely wild, extremely crazy to start off her fights, but shortly after that initial spurt of craziness, she slows down and kind of just like sits in front of her opponent and waits to counter. She will throw leg kicks to kind of keep things going, I guess, maybe bait her opponent into a striking exchange. But beyond that, that's basically how she approaches her fights. Now, if you go over to the Ryan Amanda side, she hasn't been overly impressive since we've seen her. She's had 2 fights under the UFC umbrella, and she's lost them both. First time was against Denise Gomes on the Contender Series, where she was defeated over 15 minutes. And then she came in against Talita Alencar and lost her UFC debut. I personally scored it for Amanda, I believe, from what I remember. She was the much better striker. There wasn't really much going on the mat. She did get taken down a few times, I believe, by Alencar, but there was a few takeaways that I really liked in that matchup. You can tell she adapts her game plan depending on her opponent. So she knew that Alencar is a jiu-jitsu specialist, and even though Amanda does look to get the fights down to the mat and also use some wrestling and grappling to her advantage, she knew that Alencar was going to be the best version of herself on the mat. So she said, I'm not going to take her down, I'm going to strike with her, and she looked good on the feet. She had a solid jab that she kind of interrupted Alencar's movements with, whether Alencar was trying to come in and land some strikes or she was going to go in for some takedowns. Amanda stuck out that jab and kind of put a halt to things on the Alencar side. So in this particular matchup, I think she's going to be able to hang with Puja on the feet. We've seen her improvements in the striking, but if the fight does get down to the mat, which I believe it will, Amanda is far better in the grappling department. Puja has shown that she has holes in her grappling game, and 3 out of her 4 career losses are by submission. So I think that's a great path to victory for Ryan Amanda. I think she gets those. I think she competes on the feet, lands those takedowns, and possibly even gets a submission here. So give me Amanda to start off the night with a win. Next up, we got Cody Stamann going up against Taylor Lapilus. Now, I am going to be picking Lapilus in this matchup. Cody Stamann is a veteran at this point. He is a generalist. He's competent anywhere the fight goes, but he is typically more comfortable in the wrestling. That's his main goal in the fights. He's going to want to he throws a few strikes, but mainly he wants to get the fight to the mat and wrestle his opponent. I don't think that's going to work against somebody like Lapilus. Reason being is Lapilus has great takedown defense, and he is going to be the much better striker in this matchup. He also has an 8.5-inch reach advantage. So in Louisville, it's not in the Apex. It's going to be a bigger cage. Lapilus has an 8.5-inch reach advantage, so it's going to be very difficult for Stamann to close that distance and land those takedowns. Now, we did see Lapilus in his most recent matchup against Farid Basharat get taken down 5 times, but regardless of that, he still has a career 77% takedown defense in the UFC, despite those 5 takedowns from Basharat. So I think Lapilus is going to be able to stay at range with that huge reach advantage that he has, and his advantage in the striking department as well against somebody like Stamann. I think he's going to fend them off, be the better striker. And the one thing I also noticed with Lapilus, I think he's going to be the more active striker as well. In his previous UFC fights, even though he gets taken down sometimes, he does keep up with those numbers. If you look at his fight against Basharat, he was taken down 5 times, but Basharat had 42 significant strikes in that matchup, and Lapilus had 40. So he kept up with the numbers despite getting taken down 5 times. In the previous matchup against Colin Loughran, he was taken down twice, but he outstruck Loughran, I believe, 84-48. And then the fight prior, I think he fought somebody named Issa. He got taken down 3 times there, but he outstruck him like 63-17 or something. So Lapilus keeps up with the numbers even if people take him down. So if Stamann's able to land some takedowns, Lapilus will work back to his feet and offer more volume in the striking. And like I said, I think this just basically goes with Stamann having trouble getting to Lapilus being the better striker. And neither of these guys are like UFC finishers, so I can see Lapilus winning on the scorecards. Regardless, Taylor Lapilus is going to be my pick. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, we got Eduarda Moura going up against Denise Gomes. And I can see why Denise Gomes is one of the more popular underdogs this week, but I'm going to have to go with Eduarda Moura in this particular matchup, and I'll give you some reasons why. Let's talk about Denise Gomes. So she is an absolute dog. She's going to throw heavy. She's going to be in your face the entire fight and is never going to wilt away if she's losing. She's going to keep moving forward and keep trying to get that victory. Now, we have seen a clear path to victory for her opponents, though. She can get taken down and controlled on the mat, and that seems to be the way to defeat her. If you go back to the Loma Lookboonmee fight, she got taken down 4 times and controlled and lost that fight. In her most recent outing, she was taken down 5 times by Angela Hill, who is not known for her wrestling. And Angela Hill was still able to take her down and control her and win the fight that way. Now, she's going up against somebody like Eduarda Moura, who does a great job in the wrestling and the grappling department. Denise Gomes may have the striking advantage in terms of power, but Moura has good movement on the feet, and she does ultimately want to get the fight to the ground. One thing I will say is Moura kind of keeps her chin up in the air in those exchanges, so if Denise Gomes catches her in one of those exchanges there, she might be able to hurt Moura and then kind of change the direction of the fight in her favor, but I don't see that happening here. We've seen Moura take down her opponents under the UFC umbrella and just be a wet blanket and just dominate the fights. On her Contender Series fight, she took down her opponent early, I believe, controlled her the entire time, and then eventually wrapped up a submission. In her UFC debut against Montserrat Ruiz, same thing. She didn't finish her as quickly as the opponent on the Contender Series, but she got takedowns, she controlled her on the mat, and then eventually got a finish victory. I want to say submission, but I could be wrong. Regardless, when she gets the fight to the mat, she doesn't try to force her opponents in any particular position. She kind of lets them squirm, trying to get out and possibly create some scrambles, and then she kind of like floats on top of them and just stays in control. And she's not one of the kind of fighters that just sits there and tries to control her opponent. She does a great job in doing that, but she also constantly works for ground and pound and doesn't force any submissions. If one presents itself, she will try to wrap it up, but regardless, she always puts work on the ground as well. She's able to dominate when the fight gets to the mat, and against somebody like Denise Gomes, who can be taken down and controlled, I think that's going to be her path to victory. I think she's able to get it done on Saturday night, so I will take Eduarda Moura in this particular matchup. Next up, this is probably the hardest fight I had in terms of a pick. John Castaneda going up against Daniel Marcos. Now, I really wanted to go with Marcos here. It's hard not to pick the undefeated fighter. But I have this nagging feeling about John Castaneda winning this fight, similar to that nagging feeling I had last week for Nico Price to defeat Alex Morono. Now, the reason for this is Daniel Marcos, we've seen he's an elite striker. He has KO power, but he does have that 15-minute cardio to win a decision as well. He has a split between KOs and multiple unanimous decision victories. So we know he can fight the 15 minutes. He's not like a knockout early or bust kind of guy. But one thing I've noticed is he's a counter striker. If you've seen him fight, that's what he wants to do. He's going to sit there and wait for his opponent to make a move first, and he uses his movement and counter striking to wear down his opponent. So in his most recent fight, it ended up being a no contest against Arichi Lang, but he was beating the crap out of Arichi Lang in that fight before those nut shots. But somebody like Arichi Lang is who Daniel Marcos wants to fight. He's going to be just sitting there in front, not much head movement from him. He's going to be sitting there waiting to get hit, and that's what Marcos wants. Somebody like Castaneda is not going to just sit in front of Marcos. A similarity to the John Castaneda side is Daniel Marcos versus Davy Grant. Davy Grant, although he's an older fighter, he's a wily vet, and he's constantly making moves. He's constantly throwing kicks, and that seemed to give Daniel Marcos a little bit of problems. People are arguing that Daniel Marcos lost that fight. I was kind of on the fence about it. I'm happy Marcos won. I chose him to win, but it was up in the air for sure. But the style of Davy Grant with that movement, with that kick-heavy style, posed a difficulty for Daniel Marcos, and John Castaneda has that sort of style. If you look at his most recent fight against Kyung Ho Kang, he would not stop moving. The guy was moving around the octagon the entire time, throwing leg kicks, throwing body kicks, which is similar to the Grant style. Grant does do a little bit more flashy, like spinning kicks and heel kicks and stuff like that. But Castaneda does that as well. He moves around a lot, constantly moving, constantly giving his opponents something to think about, and he also mixes in those takedowns. If you look at his takedown accuracy, it's at like 30-something%, but that doesn't tell the whole story because Castaneda isn't the kind of fighter to try to force something that isn't there. So if he has a sloppy entry or an entry that he doesn't think he can complete takedown-wise, he's going to let it go. He's not going to waste too much energy forcing something that's not there, and that leads to a low takedown accuracy, but that's the reason why. So because Marcos is a counter striker, though, he loves people like John Castaneda that are going to be pushing the action basically throughout the fight, because John's going to give a lot of volume. He's going to be moving around a lot, but I think that's going to be to the detriment of Marcos. Marcos sits and waits for the most part. He wants to counter, like we've mentioned multiple times, but I think Castaneda is just going to give him more he's going to give him a lot to think about. He's going to have the higher volume. He's going to continuously be throwing kicks, and I can see him going and mixing in the clinch and mixing in the wrestling and just giving the judges more to score. So I think I just have this nagging feeling. I'm going to go ahead and listen to my gut. Go with John Castaneda to give Marcos his first loss of his pro MMA career. Let's move on. Next up, we got Brad Katona against Jesse Butler. Now, in the order on Tapology, this is not after the Marcos fight, but on the official UFC website, this is after the Marcos fight. So if it's out of order, my bad, but I'm not going to spend too much time here. We got Brad Katona taking on Jesse Butler. I think Brad Katona is just the much better fighter overall. Jesse Butler, I do not believe is UFC caliber. I think Katona I'm not going to say runs through, because Katona's not really known to be a finisher, but I think he defeats Butler with ease, probably over the whole 15 minutes. Maybe he gets like a late finish if Butler starts like wearing out or whatever. But yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Brad Katona is, I believe, the biggest favorite on the card, and for good reason. I just think he handily gets this done. There's not much left to say, not much of a technical analysis in this particular fight. So let's just continue on, and Brad Katona is going to be my pick. Next up, we got a rematch. Andrea Lee going up against Montana De La Rosa, and these two fought back in 2019, and Andrea Lee ended up winning the fight, and that's who I'm going to pick to win the rematch as well. Both of these ladies' records are very deceiving because they are good fighters. They just have fought some of the best in the division and ended up losing more of those fights. Now, just for example, like on the Andrea Lee side, she's lost 4 fights in a row, but listen to the 4 fights. Most recently, Miranda Maverick, solid young prospect. Natalia Silva, absolute savage, love Natalia Silva. Macy Barber, also a savage. And before that, Viviane Araújo, at the time it was 2022, still a wily veteran and tough ask for anybody in the division. Now you go to the Montana De La Rosa side. She just lost a fight to J.J. Aldrich. Not a good look. But before that, Tatiana Suarez, undefeated, still undefeated. Macy Barber as well, savage. She won against Ariane Lipski. That's a solid win to have. A draw against Buena Silva, and also lost to Araújo before that, and then Andrea Lee. Now, it was kind of tricky. Like, I don't typically like picking the older fighter in like a matchup where the age gap is this big. I believe Montana is 6 years younger, but I think this goes much like the previous matchup. I know that was a completely different time of both of these ladies' careers, but if I knew that Montana was going to wrestle more, I would probably pick her in this fight. But it's just a little bit of a weird situation because Andrea Lee is going to be the better striker by far in this matchup. So De La Rosa is going to need to do that wrestling. But if you follow history, it points towards Lee. Reason being is, in Montana De La Rosa's last fight against J.J. Aldrich, she only attempted 1 takedown and was just completely content with losing the fight on the feet. If you go back to these 2 ladies in their previous matchup, De La Rosa landed 5 takedowns, but was outstruck. Let me check. Even though she landed 5 takedowns against Andrea Lee, she was outstruck. She was outstruck 73-14. So even if she does implement the wrestling, is that going to be enough? Andrea Lee was able to get back up and just destroy her on the feet. So I am going to pick Andrea Lee despite her being 35, despite her losing her last 4 fights in a row. I think she's going to be... I can't trust De La Rosa to wrestle. Even if she does, last time they fought, it clearly didn't matter. And Andrea Lee is just going to be the far better striker, I think. And to be honest, she's a tough girl too. She doesn't go anywhere if the going gets tough. She stays in the fight the whole time. So give me Andrea Lee. Probably not by finish. I'm going to say a unanimous decision victory. And get back in the win column. So I'll go Andrea Lee in this matchup. Next up, we got Charles Radtke going up against Carlos Prates. Now, I'm a huge fan of Prates. His striking is phenomenal to watch. He's got that nice, like, karate-esque bounce and, like, wide stance that a lot of these Brazilians that are entering the UFC lately kind of have. Similar to, like, a Caio Barralho idea, like, style, like that. Now, you go on to the Charles Radtke side. He is more of a wrestler, but in the UFC, he's starting to amp up his striking a lot. We saw it against Blood Diamond. Blood Diamond is supposed to be this great world-renowned kickboxer, but Charles Radtke was finding success on the feet against Blood Diamond. In his last fight against Gilbert Urbina, he was able to knock out Urbina in that first round, which was kind of impressive. I'm not going to lie. I actually had Urbina in that fight, so I was kind of upset when he got knocked out. But he did fantastic. His hands looked good. His power looked good. But against somebody like Prates, if you fall in love with your striking, you are going to get put away because Radtke is just not going to be the better striker in this matchup. If I'm Radtke, I am all in on the wrestling here. I'm going in for those takedowns against Prates, and I'm taking away his best chance at a victory, and that is on the feet. The only thing I will say, though, is Prates does have good sweeps. He has decent grappling as well, but his main goal is going to be on the feet. So I kind of want to go with Radtke because of how good his striking has looked, but I just feel like when fighters find success with their power and with their striking, they kind of throw out their game plan. Like, if Charles comes in with that wrestling game plan, I think it's going to be fantastic for him. I think he's going to find success in that department. But it's going to be difficult, especially against somebody with the range of Prates, with the movement of Prates in a bigger cage as well. So, in Prates' fight on the Contender Series, that takedowns didn't matter. Mitch Ramirez took him down, but he ended up getting swept. Prates had that nice butterfly sweep, and he ended up eventually landing a left straight that knocked out Ramirez. In Carlos Prates' UFC debut against Trevin Giles, he was actually getting outstruck on the feet. Trevin Giles looked really good in the striking, but it didn't matter because ultimately Prates landed that one left straight again that put Giles out. So even that's another reason why I like the Prates side, because even if he is losing his fights, he just needs that one shot to put his opponent away, and I think he finds it here against Charles Radtke. Somebody that's found success in the striking and may fall in love with it and may throw the wrestling out of the window. So give me Carlos Prates to KO Radtke in this fight. I am worried about this one because Radtke's actually on a 6-fight win streak. He was 3-3 in his career, so he is clearly turned it around. I just don't think he gets it done against Carlos on Saturday night. Next up, we got Thiago Moises going up against Ludovic Klein. I think this is the this is the featured fight. I thought this was the starting of the main card, but it is not. We got Thiago Moises on one side, Ludovic on the other, and I'm going to be picking Ludovic Klein here. I just think he's competent enough to on the mat to kind of avoid Moises' best option to win in this fight, and I just think Klein is the much cleaner, more technical, more powerful striker, the kickboxer in general. I think he's going to find a lot of success on the feet. Moises is going to want to wrestle, and even though Klein is known to also mix in that wrestling as well, I think it's in his best interest to just stay on the feet in this matchup. Reason being is Moises is a grappler. He's a fantastic grappler, and that's going to be his best shot against Klein on Saturday night. Ludovic is going to be miles ahead in the striking department, in my opinion. So if this is primarily going to stay on the feet, I think Ludovic is going to be able to just land the better, more effective strikes throughout the fight. And if you go over to both these guys are only 29 as well, I believe. But if you go over to Moises, he has a 44% takedown accuracy. And on the Ludovic Klein side, he has an 83% takedown defense. So he is going to be able to fend off those takedowns. I wouldn't implement any wrestling if I was Klein. I think this whole camp should be takedown defense and striking. I think he's just going to be far better on the feet. And you can't really judge these two off of their most recent fights because both of them did what they were supposed to do. They fought UFC debuters that were coming in on short notice. Thiago Moises beat Mitch Ramirez, and Ludovic Klein beat AJ Cunningham. So nothing crazy in their last matchup. I think this is going to be a wonderful fight to watch. I think Ludovic ends up winning solely due to the striking advantage that he has. And yeah, so give me Ludovic Klein in this matchup. Now we start off the main card. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you haven't already. Drop some comments down below on these particular matchups. Whether you agree or disagree with me, it does not matter. I want to hear your guys' perspective on it. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Kicking off the main card for UFC Louisville is Punahele Soriano going up against Miguel Baeza. And I tried to make this more of a technical breakdown, but honestly, there's just so many things I don't even know how to explain. There's just so many things not regarding fighting that are factor into this particular matchup that I don't know how you can make a technical analysis with this fight. Neither of these guys can be trusted in terms of their recent performances. We got Miguel Baeza on one side, who hasn't fought in 2 years. He hasn't fought since April 2022. And if you look at his record, he was 10-0. And he ended up losing his last 3 fights in a row. He lost back in June 2021, unanimous decision to Ponzinibbio. Chaos Williams knocked him out. And then Fiallo more recently knocked him out back in April 22 in his last matchup. He hasn't fought in 2 years. He's coming off of back-to-back KO losses. But he's going up against somebody like Soriano, who is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He got rear naked choked by Dustin Stoltzfus. He was a huge favorite in that fight and got dog-walked by Stoltzfus, got just dominated by him. Before that, Roman Kopylov knocked him out. I'm going to give him a pass on that one. I'm a big fan of Kopylov. I think Kopylov is a very talented striker. The time before that, knocked out Lungiambula Dalcha. Knocked him out in the second round. Nice win there. But before that, Maximov beat him. That is a terrible loss to have. Brendan Allen, I'll give him a pass on that one as well. So The problems I'm having is Soriano can't be trusted. Miguel Baeza can't be trusted at this point either. What has he been up to in the past 2 years? I know he hasn't been fighting MMA, but I think he's been doing some grappling stuff. But regardless, I don't know how he's going to look after 2 years out. I don't know how he's going to look after 2 KO losses in a row. On the Soriano side, he's been very underwhelming in his past 5 fights, 1-4. He's also moving down to welterweight for this particular matchup as well, so that's going to be very interesting to see how he does at 170. I'm going to want to see him at the weigh-ins for sure before I make like a 100% certain pick. But for right now, I will take the more active fighter in Soriano. As much as that hurts me to say, I'm going to take a chance on the underdog here and go with Soriano. I do want to see how he looks at weigh-ins, but I guess I'm going to have to. I hate these particular positions that I have when I make the picks. It's not fun picking two unreliable guys at this point in their careers, but I will take the dog shot on Punahele Soriano he's just a more active fighter. We'll see how it goes. I'll take Soriano, I guess. Next up, we got Julian Marquez going up against Zachary Reese. Now, this fight I did not do any tape study on. Most of the main cards I don't really do tape study on because I remember the fights. I have notes from them as well. But for this particular one, I'm not ready to give up on Zachary Reese just yet. I will be picking him in this fight as an underdog. I think the UFC wants to push this guy. He has that exciting finishing style, and I think they're trying to give him winnable matchups. In his last fight against Cody Brundage, that was a winnable matchup. He had a triangle choke, I believe, wrapped up, but if you guys remember that, he got slammed into oblivion. He got knocked out by the canvas in that fight, but I'm not ready to give up on him just yet because of that unfortunate turn of events against Brundage. Although there's a lot of unknowns on the Reese side in terms of cardio because he is that kind of round one finisher kind of guy who hasn't really had to change his style up because it's been so effective. So I don't know how he's going to look in the second and third rounds. I don't know how he's going to look there. I don't know if he's going to have good cardio or not. But he's going up against a Julian Marquez who has never really been too impressive. It's somebody that's coming off of back-to-back knockout losses, a year and 3-month layoff. I believe from the other analysts that I've heard, he's had multiple injuries throughout his career as well. He's had health issues in terms of like physical health issues in terms of the fights. He's not somebody that I've been overly impressed with at all in his UFC tenure. I think this is a good spot for Zachary Reese to get back in the W column, get some more experience under his belt. It's just I'm nervous to see how he is in those second and third rounds because we've never seen him there. So we'll see how that ends up going. I do think he gets an early finish because Marquez, I believe, is more of like an in-your-face kind of guy. And Zachary Reese, with his height and length, I think he's like 6'4". He's an absolute massive human being. But I think he's kind of a little stiff on the feet, which kind of worries me. But I do have faith in him. I'm not ready to jump ship. I think this is a bounce-back spot for him. I'm going to say KO victory for Zachary Reese. I don't know which round, but I will say he gets that finish. Even if he ends up on his back, he has a beautiful guard game and he can throw up submissions. I don't know how willing he's going to be in that department because of that slam KO loss to Cody Brundage, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to go with Zachary Reese here to KO Julian Marquez in a bounce-back victory. Next up, we got Bruno Ferreira going up against Dustin Stoltzfus. And I will be picking Bruno Ferreira here. I do realize that Stoltzfus is a live underdog solely because of his opponent, but I don't think he gets it done this weekend. Stoltzfus, not very impressive in the UFC. He's 2-4. His wins are Dwight Grant, who is no longer with the promotion, I believe, and Punahele Soriano, who we've talked about, has been very underwhelming in the second half of his UFC tenure. So his losses are pretty solid, I guess. Kyle Dawkins isn't really that good. Vieira, rear naked choke. Gerald Mearshart, rear naked choke. But that's going to happen. Those guys have the slickest jiu-jitsu in the UFC, some of the slickest jiu-jitsu. And then he gets knocked out by Abis Magomedov in 20 seconds. So you're going to see that Joe Pyfer win on the Contender Series. And I'm not taking anything away from that win. Pyfer's a dog, but it was an arm injury due to a slam. So I'm not going to say it's fluky or anything because he is the one that slammed Joe Pyfer. But it's not like this. It wasn't this crazy victory for him. But then if you go to the Bruno Ferreira side, Bruno Ferreira is a finisher at heart. 11 wins, 11 victories by finish. 8 KOs, 3 submissions, and his only loss is by KO as well. It was against Ruzibov in his sophomore outing in the UFC. And it was Ruzibov caught a kick and then kind of put him down. And then I don't know if the punch KO'd him hitting his head off the canvas, and then the follow-up shots. It was probably a combination of all that stuff. But I think that just showed Ruzibov's ability to, like, his power and his ability to finish fights. I don't think that takes anything away from Ferreira. This guy comes in his UFC debut against Gregory Rodriguez, who is a tough fight for anybody in the UFC, never mind a UFC newcomer, and knocks him out in the first round. Fantastic win. Last fight against Phil Hawes, ends up KOing him at the end of the first round. That is to be expected against somebody like Hawes. Hawes has no chin. It's made of glass. A gust of wind will knock out Phil Hawes, but he did come in and he did what he had to do. He did what he was put there to do, let's be honest. That was a nice bounce back spot for him, and I think he's going to be able to do that against Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus is hittable. I don't want to say he has chin issues, but he has, like, that Abus Magomedov kick to the face probably took a lot of chin out of him, that's for sure. And Ferreira has the power to put him away. If this fight does go past that first round, though, I do get worried because Dustin Stoltzfus has the Stoltzfus. It's such a tongue twister to say that last name. He does have the wrestling ability and the kind of grinding style to lose a first round, weather a storm, and then come back in that second and third round with a big wrestling pace and put it on his opponents. I can see that being a path to victory for Dustin. And although Ferreira does have that wild style that's that's a lot of output, a lot of power shots that is going to wear down on his cardio and will probably lead him to gas in most of his fights, I actually did notice a little bit more calmness and being a little more tame in that Phil Hawes fight. He's going up against somebody that he knows he can knock out, he knows has no chin, and even though he did it in the first round, from what I remember, he didn't really force anything in that Phil Hawes fight. He didn't throw himself into danger to hunt for that KO. He kind of let it happen naturally, and it ended up working out for him. So I think if he has that sort of game plan in this fight, and he doesn't just gas himself out completely in that first round, I think he does eventually find a KO over Stoltzfus, but I don't think he's going to wear himself down. I think he's going to pick his shots well. I think he's going to be more calm, at least from what I saw in that Phil Hawes fight. It's just, like, I understand Dustin Stoltzfus is a live underdog. We already talked about this. He has the ability to weather a storm and kind of come back in the later rounds. But I do think Ferreira has kind of matured a little bit in the octagon as he's fought. I think he isn't going to just throw extremely wild, leave himself open to getting taken down and worn down by his opponent. And I think he eventually finds that shot that puts Dustin Stoltzfus away. So I will go ahead and pick Bruno to KO Stoltzfus in their matchup. Next up, we got Raul Rosas Jr. and Ricky Turcios going at it in the featured fight of the night. Now, I don't really have a technical analysis for this fight here. I think Rosas Jr. is somebody that the UFC wants to push. He's a very young fighter, 19 years old at this point, and he's going up against the Ricky Turcios, who really doesn't have much to offer for him. I think Rosas is the better wrestler. He's the better grappler. I haven't really seen Rosas strike too much. He did just knock out Terrence Mitchell, I believe, in his last fight, but that's Terrence Mitchell. It's not really showing us much. The only thing I will say is if Turcios somehow prevents the takedowns from Rosas Jr., he will have the more volume on the feet. I just don't see him fending off those takedowns. Rosas Jr. is going to be able to find those takedowns when he wants in this fight. He has good control on the mat as well. He's probably going to end up finding Turcios' back multiple times in this fight if he doesn't get an early finish. And I just think the UFC is putting this matchup together for Rosas to get back into the win column after losing to Christian Rodriguez. Actually, no, he fought Terrence Mitchell in his last fight. What am I talking about? He's already back in the win column. But this fight was originally scheduled back in November, I believe, something like that. So there's a reason why they pushed for this to be rescheduled and they didn't just continue with somebody else. I think this is a spot for Rosas Jr. to get another win under his belt, get some more experience, and he's probably going to be able to defeat Turcios. I don't know if he will find the submission, but you got to imagine he does. Turcios is a tough guy, though. He might be able to stay in the fight for the full 15 minutes, but I will say Rosas Jr. eventually finds that submission on the mat. And I will go Rosas Jr. to win in this featured fight of the night. Next up, we got a co-main event. Dominic Reyes going up against Dustin Jacoby, and we've actually been doing pretty good on this breakdown. We're at 35 minutes right now, and we have only 2 fights left. And I don't have much to say about these next 2 fights, so let's keep it going. Make sure to hit that like button, guys. Show your support to the page. Hit that subscribe button if you're new for more UFC content, and drop your comments down below. I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on my picks on these particular matchups. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. Let me know your thoughts. Let's get into this co-main event. We got Dominic Reyes going up against Dustin Jacoby. Now, if this is the Dominic Reyes that just came off of a fight against John Jones, I'm picking Dominic Reyes 10 out of 10 times, but it isn't that version of Dominic Reyes. This guy fell off a cliff after that fight, but it's kind of understandable. He got knocked out by 2 former champions. Jan Blachowicz knocked him out. Prohaska knocked him out after that, but his most recent fight back, oh my God, it's been a year and a half since then, which is kind of crazy. I didn't think his Ryan Spann fight was that long ago. That's wild. Anyway, he got knocked out in like the first minute and a half of that fight by Ryan Spann. Spann's a decent fighter. He is a strong fighter, so I mean, like, I don't know what to say about it. Dominic Reyes has fallen off of a cliff, and like I said, if this is Dominic Reyes after the John Jones fight, I probably pick him to beat Dustin Jacoby, but I don't know how anybody can pick Dominic Reyes at this point in his career. On the Jacoby side, he hasn't been too impressive as of late. He's 1-3 in his last 4. It was a split decision against Roundtree loss, though. That's a kind of an impressive split decision loss to have on your record. He got beat by an undefeated Mirzakhanov, knocked out in Zechiku in under a minute and a half, and then lost to Menefield in a fight that he probably should have won. I know Menefield did land a couple of like big punches, but Jacoby basically had his way with Menefield in that fight. He landed the strikes whenever he wanted. Dustin Jacoby is an extremely talented striker. He's a former Glory kickboxer. And even though he is 36 years old, he hasn't been KO'd. Like, I'm not worried about him getting knocked out, really. Like, he hasn't been KO'd since September of 2014 by a guy named Muhammad Lawal, and it was a TKO in the second round. So I don't think he has chin issues. He was dropped, I believe, in that Menefield fight, but against somebody like Reyes, who's been, like I said, man, I don't know how anybody can pick Reyes at this point in his career. I think Jacoby's just too skilled, too talented of a kickboxer to allow this fight to slip away from him at this co-main event spot as well. So I will go ahead and take Dustin Jacoby. I just cannot trust Dominic Reyes in this matchup. Next up, we got the main event of the evening, Jared Cannonier going up against Nasruddin Imavov. Now, I will be picking Nasruddin Imavov in this fight. I do recognize the threat of Jared Cannonier. I do recognize the talent of Jared Cannonier as well. I can't really get behind a 40-year-old that's coming off of a year layoff and a knee surgery as well. That's going to go up against a 28-year-old striker like Nasruddin Imavov. Imavov is going to have the movement advantage. I believe he's going to be the better striker. In terms of striking, I think Cannonier will be the more powerful striker, and he will find some good shots in this matchup. But ultimately, I think Imavov's movement is going to be frustrating for Cannonier in a bigger cage. I think he's going to be the more technical striker in this matchup. And even though Cannonier hasn't shown any signs of terrible cardio, Imavov has shown to slow down in his fights, so that does worry me getting into the 4th and 5th round. I don't think Imavov puts away Cannonier early. He might be able to. I don't think I can see that happening, but I do see Imavov winning the early rounds and then kind of like weathering and making the last rounds a little bit closer. I I just can't get behind a 40-year-old coming off a year layoff with that knee surgery. Like I already said at the beginning, I think Imavov can work in some wrestling as well. The only thing I worry about is the cardio. I don't think Cannonier lands that knockout blow on Imavov. I think he's too technical. Imavov's too technical. I think his movement is too good for Cannonier to land that, especially in that big cage, like I said. And I do see Imavov maybe working in some wrestling as well. I just worry about the cardio. That is the biggest stress I have for this fight, especially because it's 5 rounds. If this was 3 rounds, I'd be much more confident on the Imavov side. But Cannonier has never shown cardio issues, so I do think he's going to be the better fighter the later this fight goes on. I just think Imavov is going to be too quick. I think he's going to be too technical early on for Cannonier, and I think he ends up getting another back-to-back main event wins. It's going to be great for his career. I think he has a high ceiling. He has a lot of potential in the UFC, and I think he continues the wins on Saturday night in Louisville against Cannonier. That is my breakdown, guys. Let's go over all of the picks before we go. So we got Ryan Amanda to start off the show. Got Taylor Lapilus, Eduardo Moura, John Castaneda, Brad Katona, Andrea Lee, Carlos Prates, Ludovic Klein. Unfortunately, Punahele Soriano. I can't trust either of these dudes. Zachary Reese, Bruno Ferreira, Rosas Jr., Dustin Jacoby, and Nasruddin Imavov. I haven't really taken a look at the odds, but I think I have 3 underdogs for Saturday night, so we'll see how that goes. I will be taking a close look at the weigh-ins as well. But for right now, those are my picks. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Make sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Drop a like on the channel, on the video, and subscribe to the channel for more UFC content. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.